The Fire Watch Tower. The Silent Watcher. They say silence is peaceful, but in the Fire Watch Tower, it can be deafening. For Ranger Ethan, silence was a constant companion. His tower stood on the highest peak, surrounded by endless woods and no one for miles. His only connection to the outside world was the radio, often filled with static and occasional check-ins with the base. He had done this job for 5 years, never missing a shift, never a single fire to report. But it was that same silence that brought the terror. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Ethan noticed something strange. There, in the distance, just beyond the tree line, stood a figure. A man, or what looked like one, dressed in dark clothing. At first, Ethan thought it was a hiker who had wandered too far off the trail. But something wasn't right. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. For hours, Ethan kept his binoculars focused on the figure, but it didn't budge. No radio calls came in. The figure stayed rooted to the spot, blending with the growing darkness. Eventually, Ethan lost sight of it completely as night consumed the forest. He tried to shake it off, convincing himself it was a trick of the eyes, but deep down, he knew better. The radio. The Fire Watch Tower wasn't always lonely. At least, not during the day. It was when night fell, when the only light was the flicker from the small lantern on the desk, that things felt different. Ranger Jess had been up in the tower for a week, covering for a colleague. It was quiet, peaceful. Until one night, the radio started to act up. Jess reached for the mic. She recognized the voice. It was her colleague, Mike, from a nearby tower. "Radio Mike, have you seen anyone around your tower? I just got a weird call from the base. Said they lost contact with one of the southern posts. Thought maybe you'd know something." Jess frowned. She hadn't seen anyone in days. The southern post was miles away, too far for anyone to reach on foot in a short time. She reassured Mike she hadn't seen anything, but the conversation left her uneasy. Especially when her radio crackled to life later that night. Jess hadn't made any more calls, but her radio lit up only this time. There was no voice. Just static. And underneath it, faintly, she could hear it. Breathing. Deep, heavy breathing. Jess scanned the woods, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing moved. The breathing grew louder, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The Woodsman's Warning Fire Watch Tower 27 had a reputation. Nestled in the thickest part of the forest, it was older than most of the other towers and had been used regularly for years. When they sent Rick up to reopen it, the locals in town gave him a strange look. One old man, a former woodsman, approached him as he was preparing to leave. "Woodsman, you heading up to Tower 27? Rick, that's the plan. What? Woodsman, what? Woodsman, stay past dusk. And don't answer any knocks on the door after midnight." Rick laughed it off. But the man's stern expression stayed with him. Tower 27 had been abandoned for a reason: budget cuts, or accessibility, or so he'd been told. But the further Rick drove into the forest, the more he realized how isolated it was. The woods here were thicker, and something about the air felt wrong. It didn't take long for Rick to feel uneasy. The first few nights passed without incident, but on the fourth night, as he settled into bed, there was a knock at the door. Then louder. Soft at first, then louder. He checked his watch. It was well past midnight. His heart raced as he approached the door. The Woodsman's Warning echoing in his mind. He opened the door. But when he opened the door, there was no one there.
Silent
just
woods.
the empty, silent woods.
From behind him,
And then,
he heard
from behind him,
almost
he heard it a faint,
whisper,
almost
saying,
imperceptible whisper,
"Leave."
saying,
The disappearing
"Leave."
rangers.
The disappearing
Ranger
rangers.
Emily had heard the stories.
Ranger Emily had heard
Rangers
the stories.
who vanished without a trace.
Rangers who vanished without
Some
a
said they
trace.
simply quit and left.
Some said they
but
simply
others
quit and
believed
left.
something far darker.
But others believed something
Emily
far
didn't
darker.
believe in ghosts
Emily
or curses.
didn't believe in ghosts
She
or
was
curses.
practical, grounded,
She was practical,
and she loved the
grounded,
solitude of the fire
and she
tower.
loved the solitude of the fire
But that
tower.
all changed when her fellow
But
ranger,
that all changed
Joe,
when her fellow
went
ranger,
missing.
Joe,
It
went
was
missing.
supposed to be a routine check-in.
It was supposed to be a routine
Joe was
check-in.
stationed at a tower not
Joe
far
was
from
stationed
hers.
at a tower not far
When
from
he
hers.
didn't respond.
When
Emily
he didn't
assumed
respond,
he was asleep or
Emily
off the
assumed
radio.
he was asleep or off
But
the
by
radio.
morning, he still
But
had
by morning,
made contact.
he still hadn't made
When
contact.
she arrived at his tower,
When she
she
arrived
found
at
his
his
gear
tower,
packed and the door
she
wide
found
open.
his gear packed
But
and
no
the door
sign of
wide
Joe.
open. But no
His
sign of
logbook
Joe.
was untouched.
His logbook was
And then,
untouched.
At the edge of the
And
clearing,
then, at
she
the
found
edge of the
something
clearing,
footprints
she
leading
found
into the
something
woods.
footprints leading into the woods.
Side by
Two
side.
sets, side
But
by
Joe
side.
had been alone.
But Joe had
The
been
unseen
alone.
stalker.
The unseen
Fire
stalker.
Watch Tower 39 was known
Firewatch
for its
Tower
panoramic
39
views,
was known for its
but
panoramic
isolation
views,
was unmatched.
but its isolation was
Ranger
unmatched.
Derek had always enjoyed
Ranger
the solitude,
Derek had always
the
enjoyed
quiet
the
nights,
solitude,
and the
the
starry
quiet
skies.
nights, and the starry
But that
skies.
changed one summer when he
But
started
that changed
to feel
one
like
summer
he
when
wasn't
he
alone.
started to feel like he wasn't
It started
alone.
with noises rustling
It
in the
started
bushes,
with noises rustling
footsteps
in the
that seemed
bushes,
to come and go in the
footsteps
dark.
that seemed to come and go
At
in the
first,
dark.
Derek assumed
At
it
first,
was wildlife.
Derek assumed it was
But the
wildlife.
feeling of being watched wouldn't
But the
leave
feeling
him.
of being watched wouldn't
One
leave
evening,
him.
As the sun dipped
One
below
evening,
the horizon,
as the sun dipped
Derek
below
caught
the
sight of
horizon,
something, a figure,
Derek caught sight of
standing
something, a
just beyond
figure,
the edge of the
standing
forest.
just beyond the edge of
It
the
was
forest.
too far to make out details.
It was too far
but
to
it
make
was
out
there.
details, but
Watching.
it was there.
Every
Watching.
night for a week. The
Every
figure
night for a
appeared,
week,
standing
the figure
just out
appeared,
of reach,
standing
never
just
coming
out of
closer.
reach, never coming
And then,
closer.
One night,
And then,
it disappeared.
one night, it
Derek
disappeared.
thought it was over.
Derek
when
thought
he
it was
returned to
over,
his tower,
but when he returned
found
to his
something
tower,
chilling, a muddy
he found
handprint
something chilling, a
smeared
muddy
across the
handprint
window.
smeared across
It was
the window.
fresh.
It
The
was
phantom
fresh.
lights.
The phantom
Ranger
lights.
Lucy had heard of strange
Ranger
lights
Lucy
seen in the
had heard of
forest,
strange
stories
lights
passed
seen
down
in the
from
forest,
ranger to
stories
ranger.
passed down from ranger
But
to
she
ranger.
never believed in them until
But
she
she
saw
never
them for
believed in them
herself.
until
It
she
was a
saw them
clear
for
night,
herself.
and
It was
Lucy
a
was
clear
scanning
night,
the horizon
and
when
Lucy
she
was
noticed
scanning the
something
horizon when she noticed
Bright
something
lights,
odd.
hovering just
Bright
above
lights,
the trees,
hovering
far
just
in the
above the
distance.
trees, far in
At
the
first,
distance.
She thought it might be
At
campers,
first,
but
she
as
thought
the
it
lights
might be
grew closer,
campers.
they
They
moved
moved
in
in
unnatural
unnatural
patterns. They moved in
They
unnatural
flickered
patterns,
on and off,
darting between the trees,
and
then
then
they
they
disappeared.
disappeared.
And
That
then they
night,
disappeared.
Lucy couldn't sleep.
That night, Lucy
She
felt like
the lights were still out there.
She felt like
watching
her
her.
were still out there.
The Whispering
watching
Woods.
her.
There was a legend about the Whispering Woods, a dense part of the forest that few dared to enter. The legend said that the trees spoke, calling out to anyone who wandered too close. Ranger Tom didn't believe in such tales, but he couldn't deny what he heard one night, a soft, almost inaudible whisper carried on the wind. The whispers became more frequent, the whispers became more frequent, always around the same time, just as the sun set.
From the woods,
They seemed to come from the woods, calling his name.
But
Tom tried to ignore it,
more
but the whispers grew louder,
and
more
then,
insistent.
One night,
And
they
then,
stopped.
one night,
But in their
they
place,
stopped.
something far
But in
worse
their
came the
place,
sound of footsteps.
something far worse came,
Slow
the
and
sound of
deliberate,
footsteps,
circling the
slow
tower.
and deliberate,
The
circling the
vanishing
tower.
cabin.
The vanishing
Jeff
cabin.
had heard about an old cabin
Ranger
deep
Jeff
in the
had heard
forest.
about an old
One that
cabin deep in the
supposedly
forest,
vanished and reappeared
one that
depending
supposedly
on who was
vanished
looking
and
for it.
reappeared depending on who was looking for it. It was said that those who found the cabin
One
never
autumn
returned. One autumn evening, Jeff decided to hike out and find the legendary cabin, more out of curiosity than anything else. He searched for hours with no luck, but just as he was about to give up, he saw a small, weathered cabin nestled between the trees.
The
He
hairs
approached cautiously,
standing up.
the hairs on the back of his neck
door
standing
creaked
up.
open. But inside,
the door creaked open,
the cabin was empty.
but inside, the
No
cabin was
furniture,
empty.
No signs of
No
life.
furniture, no
Just
signs
dust
of
and
life.
silence.
Just dust
then,
and silence.
As Jeff turned to leave,
And then,
the door
as
slammed
Jeff turned
shut
to
behind
leave,
him.
the door slammed
The
shut
last
behind
transmission.
him. The last transmission
from Fire Watch
The
Tower
last
12
transmission
came on a
from Fire
cold
Watch
winter
Tower
night.
12 came on a
Ranger
cold winter
Ben had
night.
been stationed there for
Ranger
months with
Ben
no
had been
incident.
stationed there for
But on the
months
night
with
of the
no
transmission,
incident. But on the
something
night of
went
the
horribly
transmission,
wrong.
something went
The
horribly
radio
wrong.
crackled to life with a frantic
The radio
message.
crackled to life with a
Ben
frantic
was calling
message.
for help. Calling
Ben
the
was
signal
calling
was
for
weak,
help,
but the signal
cutting
was
in and
weak.
signal was weak.
Cutting in and
The
out.
only
Cutting in
words
and
the
out.
bass could
The
make
only
out
words
were
the
they
bass could
recoming.
make out were they recoming.
And then
silence.
silence.
And then silence.
When search
silence
teams
arrived
when
the next
search
morning.
teams
When search
arrived the
teams
next
found
morning.
the tower
Next
abandoned.
morning.
They found the
They
tower
found the
abandoned.
tower
Ben was
abandoned.
gone.
His
Ben was
belongings
gone.
untouched.
His belongings
The radio
untouched.
still humming with
The radio
static.
still
The radio
humming with
still
static.
humming
The only
with
clue
static.
was a set of
The
footprints
only
leading
clue
into the
was
forest.
a set of
Leading
footprints
into the
leading
forest.
into the forest.
But they stopped
But Ben
abruptly
had vanished
as
into
if
thin air.
as if